Hello and welcome everybody to this your third live session as part of your fast track to generative AI. Now, I think we're going to give it maybe just another 30 seconds before we kick off just to let everyone sign in. I can see the numbers are ticking up. But one thing I will point out, and I'll cover this again once we do housekeeping, is if you're joining via Zoom, we've unlocked the chat. So if you want to communicate with your fellow fast trackers, you can do that via the chat. Just make sure you select the everyone option from the blue drop-down menu. This is also being live streamed on YouTube. And if you're joining us via that, also hello. And you can, of course, get in touch by emailing me at rosekeen@econsultancy.com. Okay, I can see our numbers are sort of shooting up, so maybe we will kick off. So yes, this is your third live session as part of the Generative AI Fast Track from eConsultancy. And today we're going to be exploring how you can apply generative AI to your customer experience. We'll also be talking you through the final project of this program as well. Now, I'm sure by now you're all pretty familiar with me, but I am Rose Keane. I'm the Content and Insight Director here at eConsultancy. But today I am joined by the brilliant Neil Perkin. Now, Neil is an author, a consultant, and one of our very favourite expert partners here at eConsultancy. Now, he's also my co-author on this programme. So it's great to have you with us today, Neil. Now, just before I hand over to Neil, a couple of bits of housekeeping. I did just mention these, but I'll go over them again just in case anyone came in the last sort of 30 seconds. Now, for those of you who are joining via Zoom, as I've mentioned, we've unlocked chat so you can communicate with your fellow fast trackers. And I do really encourage you to do that. It's a great way to share questions, learnings, any sort of recommendations you have, help other fast trackers solve problems even, and just get to know your sort of fellow classmates a bit better. It's a great way to make this more interactive. You just have to make sure that you select everyone from the blue menu, though, in the chat if you want it to go to your fellow fast trackers. If you have any problems with the stream itself, of course, you can get in touch with hosts and panelists and we'll be able to deal with that. The other thing is if you're joining us via YouTube, where we are also streaming this, you can get in touch as well, rosekeen@econsultancy.com, and I'll be keeping an eye on that inbox as we go through. And you can use that to get in touch with any questions or to respond to any of the questions to the audience that Neil will have as we move through today. Now, I think that's actually all my housekeeping done, and I know we have a lot of stuff to get through today. So, Neil, I guess over to you.
Thank you very much, Rose. And hi from me to everyone. Delighted to be working with you on this. I'm Neil Perkin, of course. I've worked with eConsultancy as an independent consultant for about, oh gosh, about 13, 14 years now. So written a lot of the best practice guides and also do a number of their consultancy and training projects, of course. And also increasingly, of course, over the last few years, worked a lot in the AI space. So what are we going to talk about today? So first, in part one, we're going to explore the major use cases for generative AI in customer experience insights, from sentiment analysis through to journey mapping, empathy mapping, and so on. So we'll look at some practical ways of applying it in that context. Then in part two, we're going to focus on how to implement those insights into meaningful improvements into your customer experience. So how you might prioritize opportunities, build action plans, and even prototype solutions. And then finally, in part three, we're going to bring together a few best practice tips and some important watch outs just to make sure that you're using AI responsibly, of course, in this context and effectively. So we're going to finish, as Rose mentioned, with the final project briefing. That you can try a few things out afterwards to apply the learning from today's session. So really think about this as both inspiration, but also instruction, a way of really seeing what's possible, but also as a bit of a practical kind of toolkit that you can really walk away with. So as Rose says, if you've got any questions as we go through, just pop them into chat. We've got a couple of polls, so we're going to make this a bit interactive as we go through. But let's begin, shall we, with looking at the key use cases of generative AI within customer experience. How can you actually apply it? And we'll really sort of ground it really why it matters, why generative AI in customer experience. Well, of course, customer experience is a pretty decisive factor now for brand success. So when things are so competitive, products and pricing often pretty similar, what differentiates the winners is, of course, how well they understand and serve their customer needs. So improving customer experience obviously builds satisfaction, but it also builds loyalty. And of course, loyal customers are more forgiving of mistakes. They're more likely to recommend you, of course, more likely to spend more over time. Poor experiences, of course, are the opposite. They drive people away fast. In this competitive world, you're only one click away, really, from losing a customer. Generative AI, of course, gives us an unprecedented opportunity, really, to identify unmet needs, to highlight moments in which we can delight customers, spot sources of friction, all at scale. When we address these quickly, of course, we're not only protecting customer relationships, but also unlocking growth by converting pain points into opportunities. So it's not just about efficiency and automation, it's also about equipping marketers with sharper insights and enabling us to build experiences that really do stand out. So traditionally, let's look at sort of insight first. Insight work has been quite resource intensive, of course, and analyzing survey results, combing through reviews, stitching together disparate feedback. It can be quite slow and often partial. Generative AI really does change that because with the right prompts, AI can take in vast amounts of qualitative and quantitative data potentially and rapidly surface the most important patterns and even simulate customer journeys or personas to reveal unmet expectations. Now, crucially, it can do this in near real time. And that means that instead of insights arriving weeks or months later, marketers can adapt strategies as the feedback comes in. And so the ability to generate these kind of live insight, these sort of live insights, that really transforms the way in which we think about customer experience. It enables faster iteration, more evidence-based decision making, and also a level of agility that wasn't really matched before. And it matches increasingly the increased pace of customer expectation. So as we move forward today, keep that in mind that the real value is not just in analyzing data faster, but also in making better customer experience decisions faster as well. So let's begin, shall we, with a quick poll. And so the poll will appear in chat. Love to know what you think about this. So I'd like you to think about what the biggest customer experience challenge is that you face right now. So what is the biggest customer experience challenge that you face right now? So is it prioritizing opportunities, creating action plans, or maybe prototyping and content creation? Just have a vote on that. And we will see what the results are. We'll just give it a minute just to see, allow the votes to come in.
Hi, Neil. I'm just going to come in with a slight sort of technical mishap here. I think we've launched maybe the wrong poll.
Oh, right.
So if you want to respond in the chat as to what is your biggest CX challenge at the moment, that's probably the easiest way to do it. Also gives you the opportunity to be a bit more flexible in maybe what you were going to respond.
Yeah.
So yes, answer that in the chat.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thank you, Rose. So the question.
I know one that we
Carry on, Rose.
go on.
No, I was just going to echo the question we are asking you is about your biggest customer experience challenge right now. So just pop in examples into chat. Thank you for doing that. All right, Joseph has got a good one here. Customers not being able to find the product that works for them based on their needs. That's interesting. Increasingly, actually, we're seeing some interesting examples of how generative AI is being built into more conversational commerce, for example. So actually, people using kind of chat to find the products that they need. That's an interesting opportunity. Carol mentioning a very wide range of stakeholders from government through to financial organizations to small businesses. Yeah, once again, generative AI very good, I think, at understanding different stakeholder needs, potentially, and giving you different contexts around that and ideas also around that. Thank you, Carol, for that. Content accuracy when relying on third parties as a source, analyzing the vast amount of customer feedback and experience across multiple channels. That's a good one, actually, because, of course, one of the benefits of using AI is that we can assimilate and synthesize vast amounts potentially of qualitative and quantitative data. Some really good ones coming in, identifying root problems, stakeholders. Thank you for that. Balancing customer needs versus operational challenges. That's Rizwana with that one. Thank you, Rizwana. Yeah, that balance is a tricky one, isn't it? But once again, I think generative AI can help you to understand where the value is potentially. Later on in the session, we're going to look at so-called customer back approaches to AI as part of your final project. So we'll think about the value of understanding your customer needs and working back from there. Matching the right cluster to the right message. Again, generative AI can potentially help with that, make suggestions, and personalization, of course. AI very good at that. Too much information. Yeah, that's a really common challenge, I think, really. Hopefully, if you apply generative AI in the right way, it can help people to navigate better, to find the information or the product or service that they really do need. Thank you for that. A very broad range of responses there. So thank you for those. Really useful to know. Some good perspective. It's clear, really, that there is a lot of different types of challenge. So the important thing is really understanding that generative AI has the potential to add value in multiple different ways. So we're going to look at some of those ways right now. So the big advantage of generative AI is that it augments human capability. So it spots correlations that humans might miss, of course. It can connect the dots between customer comments, behaviors, market signals. And so it really does enrich our understanding. It can spark ideas maybe that we wouldn't otherwise see. So the idea here is that if the AI is working with the human, that you are able to get to places that you wouldn't necessarily have got to on your own. So it massively also increases scale, which is what we mentioned before. So instead of a sample of hundreds, we can process potentially millions of data points, and that uncovers nuanced trends and maybe micro segments that were previously invisible. The third thing here is really it accelerates the marketer's toolkit from journey mapping, traditional kind of customer experience tools, competitor benchmarking, what if scenario modeling. These are all interesting processes and tools that marketers can use, which are really augmented by AI. We'll look at some of those a bit later. And so really what we're talking about here is tasks that once maybe took weeks to do can now be done in hours or even minutes. And so the result is not just greater speed, but potentially greater clarity as well. So let's have a look at some of the insight use cases more specifically for generative AI. And one of the most immediate applications is sentiment analysis. Okay, so by the way, we'll look at some of the applications here, some example use cases. And then we've also got an example workflow just to help bring it to life. Practically, how do you apply that? How would you go through the process? And then we'll give you an example of what that might look like. So starting with sentiment analysis, this means really using AI to analyze large volumes of reviews, social media posts, survey responses, perhaps, in order to understand customer emotion at scale. So best practice really here is to draw from multiple sources, track sentiment over time, maybe that avoids overreacting to maybe one-off anomalies. And so an example of using this may be using AI to analyze hundreds of aggregated customer support transcripts, right? So you're pulling out insights into why customers are frustrated with the checkout flow, for example, and many are seen to be abandoning their carts. So an example workflow that you could try here is exporting reviews or social posts or support transcripts from your CRM system or your listening tool. You feed them into a generative AI tool with a clear prompt, around classifying the positive, neutral, or negative comments or feedback, extracting the key themes, and so on. Then you can ask the AI to cluster recurring issues by product or journey stage, and then summarize the results into a report, maybe highlighting suggested fixes or amplifications. And that structured approach ensures that the AI doesn't give you raw data, but just organizes it into actionable insights. So really good kind of practical workflow. Don't forget, of course, just to be careful about uploading any sensitive data to open generative AI tools. Now, here's an example. So you could say if a fashion retailer, maybe they analyzed 10,000 reviews and comments with AI. And what that revealed was consistent frustration around slow returns. So they're identifying a new issue. Despite overall praise for product quality, they've identified a real opportunity to improve customer experience. And so acting on this, they streamline the returns process and they see positive sentiment rise by 15% within 3 months. So that's the kind of rapid evidence-based improvement that sentiment analysis through AI enables. Potentially, you're able to see things that you couldn't see before. Now, another practical use case here is journey mapping. So AI can help detect friction and also delight moments, both of those things, across the customer journey. And it can do this by analyzing behavioral data and also feedback. So, for instance, we could say a fintech company or a fintech app, if you like, discovered through AI mapping that a steep drop off occurred after third party onboarding after the third onboarding tutorial screen. They've got a certain number of screens, let's say, to go through, and there's a particular problem with one screen. So the interviews confirmed that the users found the language too technical. So what you're doing there is you're using AI to surface the issue, and then maybe using in-person interviews or your human-based research to actually validate what the AI is discovering. And so then you could simplify the copy, adding a sort of skip option and retention, and you might find that retention rate rises maybe by 22% over 30 days and so on. So what you're doing here is, of course, you're really thinking about identifying issues and opportunities across the journey. So the example workflow, of course, could be gathering behavioral data, clickstream data, app usage data, survey results, prompting the AI to highlight drop-off points, bottlenecks maybe, emotional highs, lows, which you can do from comments and so on, and then validate these findings with human-led interviews for depth or even nuance, and then use those insights to propose improvements, of course, and also maybe build a whole visual map or journey map for stakeholders. So the blend here is AI speed, but also human empathy, which can create the richest possible picture of the customer journey. And going back to that fintech app that we mentioned, another example of using AI in journey mapping might be that through the analysis of journey analytics, it was able to identify that whilst user signups were good, the rate of active usage of those customers after 30 days is pretty low. So here you could do a bit of deeper analysis of the analytics and the onboarding process, and you can identify maybe the drop-off points or specific issues that can then be addressed. Okay, so on to our next use case. This one's an interesting one, trend spotting. So this is, of course, about using AI to scan the wider environment for emerging shifts in customer expectations or competitor innovation. So you can think of it really as your radar. So generative AI can monitor industry news basically for you, or social conversations. You can even automate updates and get regular updates via agents and so on. And also it can just monitor things like forums, but do it continuously. So surfacing topics that are gaining traction and then just giving you notifications early to help you identify emerging trends, perhaps. So an example workflow basically could mean that you set up generative AI tools to regularly and frequently scan multiple sources and then prompt it to identify emerging topics of interest. And to make this as easy as possible, the generative AI tool could be used to cluster themes, perhaps. And maybe you can say cluster them by importance and urgency as a way of actually prioritizing those themes. And that can be turned, of course, into a slide or a short report for regular circulation amongst stakeholders. So you're really introducing an automation to that process. So one example could be, let's say, a premium snack brand use generative AI for trend spotting. They notice a surge in online chatter about umami flavors, let's say. And so they quickly turned that into a product opportunity, launching a mushroom-based product line, which sounds awful actually, but maybe some people would like it. And that sold out, of course, really quickly because they're capitalizing on a cultural trend. And so, with AI, you're not just reacting to change, you're actually predicting or anticipating opportunity. Okay, so on to the next use case here. We've got a couple more. Voice of the customer synthesis. So most organizations, of course, will gather feedback, customer feedback from across lots of different touch points, including anything from calls, customer calls, chats, of course, surveys, NPS scores, but it's often fragmented. Now, what AI potentially allows you to do is to bring it all together into a single unified view. and you can tag and cluster themes consistently. And generative AI can highlight maybe the top three service improvement priorities each month. So this can be an ongoing way of prioritizing what's coming out of your voice of the customer work and turning that into action. So an example workflow here, just to put that into action, you might begin by gathering as much relevant data as possible from sources like customer call transcripts, surveys, NPS, and so on. Gather them into a data set, which AI can then categorize into themes. And then the AI can be prompted to rank the themes by impact and frequency or urgency or whatever, and then a monthly summary generated, which highlights the recommended actions and priorities. All of that can be, of course, automated to then inform human action. So an example of this might be a software as a service company, maybe, and they are dealing with a bit of a churn spike after having a bit of a price change. And through analysis and synthesis of various sources like support tickets, chat logs, survey feedback, and so on, the AI was able to reveal that beyond cost, customers were also unhappy with slow onboarding support. So, in other words, it wasn't just about the one issue, there were related issues as well. So, therefore, extending support hours helped to reduce the churn. And it shows really how synthesizing that kind of voice of the customer feedback can actually pinpoint problems that you might have otherwise overlooked. Okay, so finally, let's look at empathy mapping. Really interesting one, I think. So empathy mapping is, of course, where we are understanding our customer needs and really just thinking about how can we use this understanding to inform what we are going to do. So it can help us visualize what customers say, think, do, and feel, which is a common way of doing empathy mapping, of course. So good technique here is to use qualitative and maybe quantitative data as source material, or to use an existing customer persona and an example scenario, and then prompt the AI to generate an empathy map from that persona. You can even then create a synthetic persona, so a persona generated by the AI, asking the AI to effectively generate its own relevant persona from the data that you actually have, and then ask the AI to use that persona, this synthetic persona, to map out needs and pain points and so on. And so it can also help you to combine AI generated empathy maps with maybe with real customer interview data to validate the outputs that you're actually seeing from the AI. So a really quite interesting way, I think, of using AI to understand customer needs. So as an example, for the workflow, how you practically apply that. So in this example, what we're seeing here is we're feeding AI relevant customer data from a variety of sources. We're prompting it to generate an empathy map from that data. And then we're prompting the AI to highlight customer pain points and gains from these outputs, which can then be used to inform ideas for improving customer experience. So what we might generate here from that would be so-called pain relievers, which are features or changes that we're making that would solve the pain points, and also gain creators. And gain creators are content or features which will really help to improve customer experience and meet customer needs. We're going to look at a tool for doing that in the final project which you're going to undertake. So just final example here. So a travel booking platform, maybe they applied that to interview transcripts alongside app analytics, and the AI revealed that customers feared hidden fees, didn't trust they were getting the best deals. So they came up with a bunch of solutions, of course, including things like upfront pricing, communication, trust badges, flexible cancellation, and of course that would potentially increase the completion rate. That's the power really of combining data with empathy. AI helps us to get closer to the customer perspective and then to design better experiences. Okay, so hopefully we're able to put the poll up actually. So just to ask for your input on this one. So if you could have AI analyze one customer data source to improve your customer experience, what would be the data source that you would choose and why? So maybe if you want to share an example in the chat, actually, sorry, this is a chat rather than a poll, but just pop it into chat. So an example customer data source, if you could have AI analyze one data source that you rely on, what would that be? And maybe a reason why. Okay, so just pop any thoughts you have on that into chat. Love to get your thought on that. So maybe you've got a particular data source you struggle to really get good insights from, or you've got lots of them. Maybe, Sandra, thank you very much for that contribution. Are many CSAT, so customer satisfaction, NPS surveys. So you've got lots of different surveys there. AI brilliant at assimilating all of that and synthesizing all of that information. Social media to measure customer sentiment. Good one from Catherine there. Thank you, Catherine. Interview transcripts. That's a great one. So interview transcripts potentially is very time consuming to go through. AI does a brilliant job here at synthesizing and summarizing all of that information. So thank you for that contribution. Any more, just pop them into chat. Good one here from Payee, which is CRC cases, so common problems and trends. Customer reviews, that's an interesting thought. Thank you, Michaelis. Yeah, so customer reviews, of course, again, one of those potentially time-consuming things and difficult to get the themes out of that. But AI really does supercharge your ability to do that. And Lauren mentioning about how she's found it great for analyzing MPA survey comments. Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you, Lauren. Thanks for sharing that. Supporting supporter care transcripts. Thank you. And also qualitative research, people who abandon their carts, customer verbatims. Yeah, so many different applications here. And it's a very broad, potential here to really analyze multiple different sort of data sets, qualitative and quantitative, to bring it all together. And that's the value really that you have with AI. Well done. Thank you very much for some of those contributions into chat there. All right, so now let's take that into how we implement insights into and turn those into customer experience improvements. So, one of the biggest challenges, of course, isn't necessarily just generating those insights, it's acting on them. And too often, I think teams collect lots of data, but then struggle to translate it into real improvements. Now, generative AI can really help bridge that gap. So, for example, you can apply prioritization models, and you can use AI and apply a prioritization model and ask the AI to prioritize on something like RICE is a common one, for example. So that stands for reach, impact, confidence, and effort. And have the AI objectively score opportunities based on that prioritization framework. It's a really great way of actually thinking about how you do prioritization. You're just embedding AI into that process. So let's say your voice of the customer analysis identifies 5 recurring issues. So instead of debating which one of the tackling you want to tackle first, you could feed it into the AI, ask it to apply RICE scoring, and then review the output against your goals. So that this doesn't mean that AI is making the final decision, of course. That should really sit with the human, but it gives you a structured evidence-based starting point. And that way, the highest value opportunities should float to the top, aligned with both customer needs, of course, and also the business priorities. So in practice, this is really about combining AI's analytical speed with your strategic judgment. So as an example, workflow, of course, what we might do here is to feed an AI tool with a list of customer pain points, which have come from your insight work, ask it to prioritize them based on a structured model like RICE, and then adjust this scoring to take account of our strategic goals or constraints, and then format a finalized list for sharing with stakeholders. So all the way through there, you've got applications of AI, not just one dimensional, but all the way through the process there. Now, the value proposition canvas, if you're not familiar with this, is a particularly valuable tool here, I think, in enabling marketers to work back from identified customer needs to define customer experience solutions. So generative AI can be integrated throughout the workflow to support that process. So you might begin with your example persona and a scenario, perhaps, which you would like to consider. So for example, you could start on the right-hand side here of the canvas, your customer needs side, and map out relevant needs that the persona may have in this situation. So by giving your generative AI tool the context of your persona and the scenario or example situation, you can then prompt the AI to help suggest relevant customer needs. So the job to be done is typically the core task or functional need that the customer is looking to fulfill. So you want to keep this expressed as a short, simple sentence. The customer gains, though, are all the elements that can help contribute towards a positive customer experience. Those are the gains, and all the things that will help the customer to fulfill their needs well. Those are the gains. The customer pains, though, are the elements that may get in the way of a good customer experience, or they may frustrate or lead to a poor resolution. And so you can take these sections in turn, prompt the AI, and generate a recommended list that can help you to map out all of the important customer needs relevant to your scenario. Then once you've done that, of course, you've got all of your customer needs mapped out on the right-hand side. What you can then do is move across to the left-hand side of the canvas. And this is about all of the potential features or content or solutions that can meet those needs. So here again, you can prompt the AI by feeding the customer job to be done, feeding it the customer pains and gains. So all the work you've done so far, you can now feed that into the AI and ask it or prompt it to generate recommended content or recommended solutions or recommended features that can meet those identified needs. So the gain creators here map across, of course, from your identified customer gains, and they are the features or the content that are going to help to create those customer experience gains. The pain relievers they map across, of course, from your customer pain points, and they again maybe features, content, other solutions and they are designed to ensure that the customer pains don't become a problem, that they don't damage your customer experience. And finally, of course, you can prompt the AI to recommend how these features or content can best be delivered to the customer. So, for example, is it a feature in the app, or perhaps a notification to existing users, or copy on the website, or an email communication, and so on. So in this example here, just going to put these up as we go through the slide here. So we've mapped out a few potential ways, and worth saying at this point that this value proposition canvas will feature in your final project. So just really useful to go through it in a bit more detail just to understand how it works. So we've mapped out here potential ways in which Airbnb, we're going to use that as an example, could use AI to meet customer needs. So our scenario here could be an existing Airbnb customer looking to book a weekend away. So starting on the right-hand side of the canvas, we can define the key job to be done. And that might be perhaps access to relevant information. So basically what we're saying here is that actually what I fundamentally need to do here, my functional task, is I'm trying to access relevant information as and when I need it in a timely manner. And that might be before the trip, during the trip, or after the trip. The customer gains here may be to find the right accommodation easily. I want also to have access to relevant information about my stay, maybe helping with communicating with the host, providing the customer with tips to help them get the most from their weekend away. All of those things are potential customer needs or gains. But then the pains here could relate to not being able to access or maybe action relevant recommendations. The user feeling that the recommendations are too generic, they're not for me, or not tailored enough to their needs. So mapping these across then to the left-hand side, now that we've mapped out our customer needs, we can generate some features or content or solution ideas that can help create the gains. So, for example, here, and also relieve the pains. So, for pain relievers, for example, maybe we're talking about here providing clear calls to action, referencing preferences as a way to kind of show that you're personalizing that experience, right? So, on demand, real time access to answer queries and assistance via a chatbot, maybe. You've got lots of other ways of actually addressing directly the gains that you've identified and the pains that you've identified as well. So those features, when it comes to channel, we might have those features and content delivered as part of the in-app experience. or maybe as part of other channels as well, like emails or notifications and so on. So you can see here what you've done is you've understood your customer needs. That's where we start. You've used AI to identify what the common gains are, the common pains. And then once you've mapped out your customer needs, you can then work back from there to use AI maybe to identify potential gain creators and also pain relievers. A fantastically useful tool, this one, has all kinds of applications. Now, even with strong ideas, execution matters, of course. So this is where AI can also play a role, helping us turn those opportunities into action plans. And you can ask AI to generate a detailed plan that includes even timeframes, owners, recommended owners, dependencies, maybe potential milestones. It can even suggest relevant KPIs and recommend a cadence for how you measure those KPIs as well. So, as an example, one team could use AI to generate a 12-week onboarding improvement plan. The plan not only details actions like redesigning copy, extending support hours, but also built-in measurement points such as NPS CSAT surveys, all at weeks 4, weeks 8, and so on. So it's creating here, you can see you're using AI to actually generate a structured roadmap for improvement and to keep accountability clear whilst also saving the team hours of potential manual planning time. So, of course, you would want to validate that in a human way, but really useful there to use AI to draft a potential plan for you. Now, the final piece in this jigsaw, if you like, or the final piece in this section is prototyping, rapid prototyping. And one of AI's most practical strengths is, of course, in helping teams to move from idea to testable prototype almost instantly. So you can use AI to generate copy variations for an email or a landing page, for example. You can get it to create lots of different potential copy variations there. You can also use it to create wireframes and mock-ups of a new user flow. There are tools that you can use to do this, specific tools like Lovable and so on. Or even produce multiple design options for a checkout experience, for example. And those variations can then be tested quickly, either through A/B testing or usability studies, and the results then fed back into the AI for further iteration. So, as an example, a retailer might generate 3 alternative checkout flows with different trust badges, different options, test them with 500 customers in a week because they've generated simple prototypes and flows, and then they can reveal the design which reduced abandonment the most. And so the key takeaway here really is that AI doesn't just give us ideas, it enables us to test and also to validate them faster than we could before. Okay, so we do have a vote now. So I think you have got a preview of this vote, so hopefully we can put this back up again. So where do you think, the question is, where do you think AI is going to potentially save you the most time? So given all of those different scenarios that we've looked at, where do you think it might actually save you the most times? I think we're just popping the right poll up right now. Just give it a second. There we go. So is it prioritizing opportunities? So that might be because there's so many things you could do, the value of AI in actually analyzing customer feedback data and so on to identify the right opportunities. Is it in creating action plans and validating or viable action plans? Is it about prototyping, content creation, maybe anything from innovation through to how you're generating content? What do you think? 3 different options there. So where do you think it could save you the most time? Interested to know what you think about this one. Right, just giving you a bit longer to vote on that one. So just a single choice on this one. Just vote for one of these. And I think we can see the answers. So if we're able to pop the answers up now. Brilliant. There we go. Oh, a bit of an even split here, actually. So prototyping and content creation being just marginally ahead here. So both of those use cases are becoming increasingly common, of course. Lots of focus on content creation in particular. But also not forgetting that prioritizing opportunities feels like a really useful application here, doesn't it? That one that could really save you a lot of time. And I think there is lots of opportunity. All of those use cases that we've looked at today, lots of opportunity here of assimilating and summarizing, pulling out themes and so on from lots of data points, qualitative, quantitative. So getting to that understanding much quicker than you could before. That's the secret of really extracting real value from generative AI in customer experience. Interestingly, we've also got quite a few people voting for creating action plans. So there you go. I think it shows us, doesn't it, that there are lots of different potential opportunities to save time in customer experience. So thank you for voting for that. Really good. Um, okay, so we're just going to touch on briefly on best practice tips, a few watch outs here, and then we will just finish by briefing in your final project, and then happy to take any questions that you might have. So just to pull everything together at the end here. So best practices. So first, always combining AI with human judgment. That's number one, of course. AI can process huge amounts of data, but it doesn't know your brand context necessarily. It doesn't know your culture, doesn't necessarily know your strategic goals. That's where your expertise comes in. Second, using diverse data sources. So feeding AI with data from multiple touch points, maybe surveys, social posts, and feedback, support calls. You've got an opportunity here to really use a diverse set of inputs. That makes the insights more accurate, potentially reduces the risk of bias as well. Iterate and validate. So think of AI as giving you a first draft of insight. So the real power comes from running rapid cycles, really, of analysis, testing, and refinement. So when you approach AI in this way, as an accelerator rather than an oracle, I suppose, you build insights that are both richer but also more reliable. Okay, so now some important watch outs here. Hallucinations, of course, right? So AI can still confidently generate incorrect outputs. It looks great because it looks like the AI is very confidently saying that. So always validate key findings against actual data. Bias, just be aware that models can reflect data that they're trained on. And so bias may be a thing. Bias can creep in. So review outputs with an eye for fairness and inclusivity. Be aware of the data that it's using for its answers. Privacy, never input personal or sensitive data, customer data into publicly open tools. Always check for compliance, of course, and work with secure enterprise solutions for anything which is customer identifiable. And then finally, of course, just handling carefully, handling data carefully. If you handle all of these different watch outs in the right way, those risks can be mitigated, they can be managed, but they should never be ignored. So just a few watch outs there to remember always when you're using AI. All right, good. Final thought here is about which customer experience opportunity that you're keen to explore first using generative AI. So maybe something that you haven't done yet that you're keen to explore now. Is it analyzing customer sentiment, or would you rather focus on mapping journeys, friction points? Is that an opportunity that you haven't done and you much of maybe you want to do more? Maybe spotting emerging trends or synthesizing voice of the customer or understanding user needs. So out of the use cases, the primary use cases that we looked at, where do you see the real opportunity to explore and do more of? That's the question. So give you a bit of time to vote on that. And as soon as we've done this poll, then we'll brief in the final project. And then, of course, we can take any questions that you might have. So just remind you, you can pick one of these, I believe. So just choose from those options. Single choice. Quite interested to know. I mean, these are really good use cases, aren't they? All of them. You probably want to vote all of them, really. But if you had to pick one, which one would it be? Okay, votes coming in. Okay, when you're ready, if you want to show the results, we'll just have a look at the results there. Interesting. All right. So mapping journeys and friction points, number one, understanding user needs, number two, and then we have a sort of tie really for no, spotting emerging trends, actually. That's number two, strictly speaking, and then understanding user needs. And then the other two tied in fourth place. So analyzing customer sentiment and synthesizing voice of the customer. That's interesting, isn't it? So mapping journeys and friction points, I think it's a really great use case, that one. Lots of value there that we can really kind of understand and just synthesize stuff very quickly there. But also spotting emerging trends. That is a really interesting one. And the way in which you can set it up to do continuous scanning and notification and so on. And understanding user needs, of course, which will, speaking of which, we're going to look at in our final project. So thank you for voting on that. Good. All right, so let's have a look at your final project. So we're going to brief this in now, and then Rose will just talk to you about the submission. So as previewed, we're going to use the value proposition for this one. So the task for the final project is to complete a value proposition canvas for your brand. So what I'd like you to do here is to start by using an existing customer persona that you're familiar with. Or if you want to, you can generate a relevant customer persona yourself using a generative AI tool. Either one of those options is fine, but start with the persona and then think of a relevant scenario or situation in the context of your brand or a customer journey, for example. So it could be, let's say, an onboarding process, or it could be a customer looking for a solution or needing specific information. So persona, and then a scenario or situation. Then feed that information along with the template of the value proposition canvas into your favored generative AI tool. Prompt it to originate a job to be done. So you might need to specify that this is about expressing a functional task in a single sentence for this scenario. And then you can prompt it to give you some example customer gains and customer pains. Of course, remember here to just articulate to the AI, remind it what these terms mean. Always helpful to actually do that. And also remember to prompt the AI to keep it short and be specific. Remember in the virtual assistant module, we talked a lot about how you need to be very specific when you're prompting AI. So don't forget about that. If you want to, what you can do here is you can prompt the AI to fill out an example empathy map, which you can use to augment this process. You could start with the empathy map maybe, and then use the outputs of the empathy map to inform your right-hand side of the value proposition canvas here, if you want to do that. So once you've done that, of course, then prompt the AI to map out, of course, suitable features or content or other solutions. So you can prompt it in a way which is most relevant for your brand and your situation. So if you do a lot of content-driven solutions, maybe it's that, or maybe it's other forms of like features in-app or on-website features, maybe. The final part of this, once you've created your gain creators and your pain relievers, so again, prompt it in the right way to address the customer gains with features or content, and then specifically to address the customer pains with, again, features or content. And then finally, fill in the channel piece, right? So the channel piece is prompting the AI to recommend suitable channels and formats to deliver those features and content. Okay, hopefully that all makes sense. Start on the right-hand side, use an example persona or generate one, and then use an example customer scenario or situation, and then prompt the AI to come up with a job to be done with customer gains for that match those persona and scenarios, customer pains, and then map it across to the solutions on the left-hand side. Okay, so that is your final project. A good way to, I think, apply it in a very kind of practical solution. So Rose, actually, just before I move on to the summary and key takeouts, do you want us to say something about the submission details?
Yes, I'll just talk through how you can get your
your wonderful Canvas submitted. So when week 5 opens on Monday, next Monday, you will have access to a submission zone. So it will have both the Canvas that you're to fill in, an instruction sheet that covers all of how to do this in a very sort of succinct and easy way with arrows and whatnot. And you'll have a submission zone. So when you click into the submission zone, you'll have the option to upload your piece, and you can do it there. Now, a couple of notes on deadlines here. So you can actually upload your Canvas at any point between now and the closure of the program. However, if you do want to be included in next week's wrap up, where myself and Neil are going to review a handful of these, talk about the elements that we like, maybe offer some suggestions, then you do need to submit for the 20th. So do have that in mind if you want to maybe get some expert feedback on your Canvas as well. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Neil to do some final takeaways, and then I think we have a couple of questions, and hopefully we have time for those.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Rose. And yeah, really looking forward to seeing some of the input. So if you do get them in by the 20th, then obviously I can give some more direct feedback on some specific examples there. Okay, so just recapping the main points, of course. So generative AI really does empower marketers to uncover multiple customer experience opportunities faster, but also deeper, and of course, remember, at greater scale. So key use cases we looked at in this session: sentiment analysis, journey mapping, trend spotting, voice of the customer synthesis, and also understanding customer needs. Implementation, of course, is about prioritization and action planning, not just about getting those needs, of course, and also rapid prototyping, so not just analysis. The best practice means blending AI insight with human judgment, so using diverse data sources, validating outputs, and so on. And of course, we've got to stay alert to the watch-outs, things like hallucinations, bias, privacy risks. So when used responsibly, generative AI can become a real kind of co-pilot or partner for improving customer experience. Bring us, obviously, to focus on ideation or great ideas for improvement, creativity, empathy, and also for strategic action. Good. Thank you very much. So well done. Covered a lot of ground in that session. So very happy to take any questions that you might have.
Brilliant. Thank you, Neil. That was fantastic. We've had a lot of questions come through. Now I think we have probably about 5 minutes to tackle a few of them. So I'm going to kick off one of the first we got, which was from Katie, who just wants a question about data confidentiality. So she asks, are there ways to confidentially add or upload your data to avoid other people accessing it? Now, Neil, I'll let you come in on this as well, but essentially, my understanding is the most secure way to do this is to use an enterprise solution. Though even then, I would pay very close attention to the settings, make sure you're following the sort of the guidelines that are shared by your IT and your data teams. But Neil, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, this really is one where you have to have an enterprise policy and a procedure, really. So if you don't have that, I would default to checking with IT and your provider, your enterprise provider. So definitely enterprise level solutions tend to be where you can do that. Outside of that, just be really careful because obviously the risks are quite high with that.
Yeah, a lot of the sort of more public tools will have a setting where you can say don't share it with the model, but my understanding is that there is some evidence that even within that, you do get leakage. So, just to be extra careful, I would make sure that you check before you do any uploads of any data,
Yeah.
really. Fantastic. I'm just going to check our Q&A and see what else we have in here. We have a couple of ones around the end of how to submit things. We have some recommendations around tools. So Martin asks, well, could you send through a list of AI tools you'd recommend for different areas? Obviously, that's a bit of a fuller thing. Maybe you could suggest a couple for the use cases we've discussed today.
Yeah, I just think really the thing to think about here, it's difficult to kind of say use ChatGPT for this and use Claude for that, because actually they have quite common features. They do tend to sort of have certain models, for example, like deep research models or analysis models, which are particularly good for certain things. But I hesitate to kind of say ChatGPT is really good for that and Gemini is really good for that. However, I would say a way to think about this is that you have the general tools like Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, and so on, but you also have specialist tools and also embedded tools, so AI embedded into your existing systems. And so it's really worth thinking about what you might have access to across all three of those different options.
Yes, that very much echoes my kind of view on it. I think also which is best for you will kind of depend on exactly how you're approaching the task. As you say, there are a lot of commonalities between things, though there are, I think it's not unfair to say a lot of people who are limited to Copilot say that there are some challenges around utilizing Copilot for some of these more complicated tasks, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a question, I think, in chat from Katie about they're using Copilot. And would you say it's reasonably safe? Again, I would double check with IT, particularly if you're going to be uploading sensitive data like customer data and so on. Just double check that because you don't want a situation because the risks are, too high. But generally, Copilot you can use. It's not necessarily quite as good as other tools in certain areas. But if it is your enterprise solution, there's certainly ways in which you can use Copilot in all the kind of use cases that we have looked at today.
Fantastic. I know there are a few more questions in the chat, but unfortunately we are running a little short on time. So what we will do is we'll review them, and if there's anything that we can sort of tackle in the meantime, we will. But to just give you a little bit about what to expect from next week, which is your final week of the Fast Track to Generative AI in Marketing. It has gone really quickly, hasn't it? But I hope you've all been enjoying it and getting a lot out of the course. So alongside your final project, there will be a few other elements. So we will have a final course, which is entirely focused on scaling and the future. So we're going to talk about some approaches you can take to taking generative AI applications beyond just the pilot into a more scaled approach and some ways to think about that. But we're also going to think or explore some ways in which you can better plan for the future. So some horizon scanning techniques, and also some things to think about in terms of future-proofing your own career in response to generative AI, but also whatever technologies may turn up in the future. The only constant is change and all of that. So there's some really good content in there. So I would recommend definitely checking all of that out. Now, as that is your final week of content, we do have a week afterwards for you to catch up. But if there are any course modules that you have not completed yet, this is a great opportunity to catch up on those. What else? Next week, we also have our final live, which will feature both me and Neil again, where we'll be reviewing some of those submissions, talking a bit about the sort of latest and greatest in generative AI, some trends, and a little bit about how to think about the future as well. So do tune in for that. A little reminder that in order to graduate and get your certificate that you can share on LinkedIn, etc., you do need to complete each one of the e-learning modules. Once you've done that, you will count as a graduate and you'll be able to get your certificate. So I just want to shout out a couple of other elements. We've got some great new generative AI content on econsultancy.com. I've been sharing some of that in the forum, so do check that out as well. Also, if you've been enjoying this course and you think it's something that perhaps your sort of team would enjoy, I'm pleased to share that, first of all, we are soon going to announce our next broad public dates for the Fast Track to Generative AI in the new year. But in addition to that, we do also offer bespoke versions of this for specific organizations. So say, your particular organization would love to do this from a particular angle. Let's say you work in retail, we can do a version of that for that. So do reach out if that's something you're interested in. You can get in touch with me or you can get in touch with your client manager. And with that, I'm just going to say a huge thank you to you, Neil, for taking us through that. I found that very engaging, lots of learning to take away. And of course, a huge thank you to all of you in the audience. Thank you for being so responsive in chat and answering all those questions. And I will see you next week for our final live session as part of this fast track. Have a great rest of your day and see you next week.